Good afternoon, good evening, and good night. This is Screen Watching. This is the podcast where we review the movies, we review the TV shows, and then we chat about some movies and chat about some TV shows and just generally get along. But this week we have the all-important question, what is the worst thing that you've ever done? Folks, send us an email, let us know. On the podcast this week, we're going to watch a movie. It's called The Drama, and it explores the question, wait for it, what's the worst thing you've ever done? Some people may say the worst thing I've ever done was see the Super Mario Galaxy movie. Not me. I would not say that. Simon Foster, my compatriot here, he may say that, but also maybe he doesn't. We'll find out what his thoughts were on the feature film. I've seen both of them. I also have thoughts. Also, just a couple other things we'll chat about on the podcast this week. Paradise finished out its second season. I'm going to take a look back at the entirety of season 2. And I guess the big question is, does it hold up to the promise of season 1? Thoughts to follow. Your Friends and Neighbours is in season 2 on Apple TV. Hot takes there. And also, I'm taking a deep dive back to this glorious time period called 1997, where there's a TV show. I'm not going to talk about the name of the show. Stick around, find out. And folks, it's going to take you on a ride. We're talking about that. There's a Netflix show. This is a big podcast, and we only get it all happening if we start playing the credits right now.
This is not like TV, only better.
Television! Teacher, mother!
Secret lover.
What, that's it? That's your movie?
Well, I said that I had an idea for a movie.
Mamma mia, Simon Foster, how you doing this morning?
Beautiful reference to the Mario Brothers sequel that's clogging up cinemas as we speak. I'm doing very well, Dan Barrell. Hello, screen watchers everywhere. It's good to be back, and it's good to have in front of me what I think is one of the most interesting, thoughtful, contemplative American films I've seen in very many months. And we're going to get into talking about the drama very soon. But boy, have I not stopped thinking about it since I saw it.
But to Simon, at first we must start talking about the pizza pies.
We're not really going to start with Super Mario, are we? Let's jump into the galaxy, into the drama first.
We're not really going to do this with like Australian accents. Is that really what you're telling me? You're not going to adopt a fake Italian accent for this podcast?
I wish they had for the film. I didn't miss it in the first one, but I really did miss something to hang on to have a giggle at in the second film. And I would have loved Chris Pratt, who has just fallen out of the galaxy as far as I'm concerned. He's just terrible. I would have loved to hear him do the Italian accent.
Look, Simon, I think that we're actually firmly in the world of Super Mario right now, so we're going to play the clip.
Hey, Luigi! What's up, Mario? Behold! I made a masterpiece for Princess Peach. What do you think?
Love the colors!
It's trash.
How dare you look at my masterpiece and say that!
I'll burn the skin off your bones!
Wow. Sorry about that. That's the old Bowser talking. Still working through my demons, I suppose.
All right, Simon, playing in the cinemas right now is the Super Mario Brothers Galaxy movie. This is, of course, the sequel to the Super Mario Brothers movie, which pulled in $1.361 billion US at the box office. And so people may be thinking, was there anything left to say about Super Mario Brothers? And the thing that was left to say was, we would like another $1.361 billion in our bank account, please. So the question that we have coming into this, and I'm going to ask you just a couple of quick questions, and we're going to sort of finish this out because I don't know there's actually a lot to discuss with this one. But Simon Foster, what were your thoughts on the first movie? Are you pro, negative? Where are we at?
No, I was very pro. The first one, to me, was almost the perfect sort of nuclear family movie godsend. It had a lot of colour and movement for the toddlers. It had some great action for the teens, and it had a certain wit and a certain style for the growing up. So that it was a real family movie. You take the whole family along to see it. Absolutely not this very sorry sequel. There are so many new characters being thrust out of the screen that all I could think of was this is entirely been created to stick some new faces on a Happy Meal box somewhere. That this is, I was very cynical. I was at least as cynical about this movie by the end of it as everyone going into it who made the film was. I just thought this was a one of the great drop-offs in terms of quality from one film to another.
Okay, let me tell you about my day, Simon. I woke up, I had a shower, I walked the dog. A little while after that, my child woke up, and while she was eating breakfast, I said, "Hey, we're going to go see the Super Mario Galaxy movie. How about we watch the first movie because she'd never seen it before?" So we watched Super Mario Brothers the movie, followed by the Super Mario Galaxy film.
Mm.
I've heard other critics talk about the drop off between the first and second film. I don't think it's there. Both movies are on par in terms of quality, and I know this having watched them both back to back, straight off each other. I think that the Super Mario Brothers movie franchise has a really interesting thing that it does, which is that it's trying to adapt these Super Mario Brothers games into some sort of narrative form. And Super Mario Brothers is weird. It is a very strange video game with no real. There's obviously a clear narrative with the very first Super Mario Brothers movie, which is that Plumber needs to rescue Princess. But that's not really quite enough story. So they've really sort of taken the world building of the Super Mario Brothers games and tried to apply a fulsome narrative on top. And I think when you get to the second one, it means that you can't do anything as simple as Plumber rescues Princess, and suddenly things just get a bit weirder and stranger and more complicated in the same way that, the video games do. So when you play Super Mario Brothers 3 and 4, Super Mario Brothers World and then Galaxy, you might be playing Wonder. It's really this thing of they give Mario new gimmicks every time. He's wearing different costumes. There's new characters introduced. There's a new bad guy. It's all the things that you kind of expect with it. And I think they've actually held really true to the Mario Brothers games in the way that they've structured this second movie. For people who aren't into the second movie, I would suggest that they've kind of maybe missed the point on the sort of the effort of this to not necessarily make a movie, but make an adaptation, which the argument should be that they should be making a movie. And I'm not insensitive to that at all. But I think that as an adaptation of Super Mario Brothers as a franchise concept, which is largely what you've bought into when you've bought a ticket to see the Super Mario Brothers Galaxy movie, I think they've actually been fairly successful with it. I don't think it's a great movie. I think it's a little bit hollow feeling at times, even as a Nintendo kid of the 80s who got most of the references.
Why
some
didn't
of the
they
real
care
deep
about these
dives in it.
people in the first film?
Well, I don't think that it's any sort of less deep. So
Well,
what do you mean? Why don't they care
why am I thinking that the first film was far more character driven, far more structured as a film that could play as an adventure
not really.
comedy kind? It absolutely is. That's what I'm saying.
When you
That's
watch
what I'm
the
saying
first film, when you watch the first film, you got about 10 minutes of them hanging around in Brooklyn. Yeah, I'm just saying, I watched it this morning. So you got about 10 minutes of them hanging around in Brooklyn.
Yep.
And then what you said then holds true for the next sort of 20 minutes. But then as they go on their sort of quest, it becomes really anarchic and really all over the place. There's all the stuff with the Donkey Kong characters.
No, not true.
And
that's incorrect. It doesn't become anarchic and all over the place. It becomes a fairly standard sort of 3-act story that involves. Yeah, it does. And it involves the characters in a way that gives them depth, that creates excitement, it creates humor that a movie does. Why have they jettisoned that in favor of just fan service?
There's actually about 4 or 5 acts in that first Super Mario Bros.
Why have
movie.
they jettisoned what they created in the first film in the service of just pandering fan service in the second one?
I don't think they have.
Yeah, they absolutely have.
I've just watched them both back to back.
Oh, I've watched them both as well, and that's what I'm saying, that the point is that the second one, by your own admission, is just trying to capture the structure of the gaming franchise.
I'm not saying it's the structure of the gaming franchise. I'm saying maybe it's more maybe the essence and spirit of the way that these games exist.
Yeah, why jettison what was so successful about the first film to create everything that's been wrong about... Wait a minute.
One way to think about
everything that's been wrong about video movie adaptations from the beginning. Because I think this is every bit as bad as some of the worst video game adaptations we've seen.
See, I just don't think that's true. But I think maybe the way to sort of think about this second film is that it's actually an adaptation of Super Mario Brothers Galaxy, the video game. There's so much of the video game that's inherent in the structure, the world building creation of this movie. It is an adaptation of this very specific video game.
Right. And that's, which means it's a misfire and a failure as a film.
Well, how is that the case? I mean, we've seen the first film, which is a adaptation of Super Mario Brothers, the 1984 video game.
Right.
And then this one is kind of an adaptation of Super Mario Brothers Galaxy.
So you're
which came
saying the
out on-
1984 video game started the first 15 minutes in Brooklyn, and then we understood the relationship between the two brothers.
Didn't say it was
as it's-
beat for beat. I think you're just getting
No,
really pedantic with this.
I don't think I'm getting pedantic at all. I think I'm saying what you're saying about the second one, that it adheres very closely to the as an adaptation of
Yeah,
the
but not in terms,
Galaxy
maybe
game.
not
Wait a
necessarily in
minute.
terms of beat to beat with the story coming through, but in terms of the visual representation of the game, in terms of the characters being introduced, in terms of the way that the world,
So the filmmakers
like,
have
quite
decided
physically
to
in
jettison all the
Galaxy.
people who came on board to the tune of $1.4 billion for the first film. They're going to say, well, all those people who love that as a film, I don't care. We're going to make a movie that only speaks to the gamers.
I don't think they've done that at all.
But by your own admission, they have.
I haven't. I didn't say that. I didn't say they jettisoned it. I'm just saying that they have adapted the second, like this other game in the Mario Brothers franchise. I'm just saying
In a far less successful form, in a far less successful filmic format than they did with the first one.
Look, I mean, you may feel that's the case. I don't actually think it's necessarily any worse. I just think it's a bit different. I'm just saying, having watched both back to back, I don't think the first one was by any means a artistic triumph. I think that the first film is a perfect 3-star movie. I've got a 4-year-old, and I think the challenge for adapting Super Mario to the screen in part is that you probably have to think about 4-year-old as like the base entry level for any kids coming into this. But then you have to try to make it entertaining enough for ages beyond. Whether or not people find
why is a 4-year-old the base entry level coming into this? This is nostalgia. She doesn't know what Mario is. She hasn't.
Simon, to get to $1.3 billion, I think that it needs to be more than just nostalgia.
That's a lot of
I
4-year-olds.
think,
And it wasn't, yeah. That's a lot of 4-year-olds.
I'm not saying it's a movie for 4-year-olds. I'm saying that's the base level. So you're probably not making it for kids younger than that because you're really getting in some Peppa Pig territory at that point. But like 4-year-olds is probably about like the bare minimum sort of age you can get away with making to sort of, the 4 quadrants encompassing sort of feature film that's going to entertain people of all ages. Whether all ages are necessarily entertained by this one, I do know that I sat next to a 4-year-old who loved the movie and was totally into it. I think that this one is, again, just another 3-star picture in the same way that I think the first one was. I don't think it's necessarily worse than the first one. I don't think it's better by any means. I think that all of them are sort of fairly hollow if you really want a really sort of strong narrative experience coming through. But if you're after an adaptation of these very weird, very strange video games, I think that it meets the brief and delivers. I think that if you've gone into this guy, I like the first film, I think most people are coming out of the second one who aren't casting the same critical eye that you are on it, Simon. I think most people are going to be pretty happy with it. And I saw a lot of cheerful people leaving the cinema today.
Circumstantial evidence isn't going to cut it on this one. This is an inherently poorer film than the first one, right down to its very sort of ugly aesthetic. Despite having the same bunch of directors who brought the first one to absolute beautiful life on the screen, and it was a beautiful looking film, this looks like one of those French-made cheapies that they put out at the end of January to fill a few screens.
I mean, the first one and this one are both French-made, just as an interesting aside.
That's fine, but the first one was given a whole lot more artistic input.
I actually don't think it is. I think that
no, I do think it is, Dan.
I think there's a sequence in the first film where Mario's first entered the Mushroom Kingdom, and I think that is very sort of vibrant and kinetic. But the rest of the movie kind of looks like this film.
Yeah,
but like that sequence, which is I think the best sequence in that first film.
And what about the lack of substantial villainy in this one? In the first one, Jack Black's villain was a great comic creation, and he's done some of his best work, including the now iconic Peaches song. Where is the villainous sort of center of this one?
Well, the villainous center is his son.
They turned the back on Jack Black's character Bowser in this one.
Yeah.
He becomes this, but they're my friends kind of.
And then he turns.
Does that happen in the game? Does that happen in the game?
No, because it's a sequel to the first film as well. Like, it's got to serve as quite a number of beats along the way, Simon.
Which it fails to do.
Oh, I don't think that's the case. But Simon's not into it. I think it's perfectly fine. I think it meets the brief. I think anyone after this to be a, animated classic, I don't think people got that with the first film, and I don't think people are getting it with this one either. I think it's...
All right, Super Mario Galaxy
perfectly
movie.
3. I'll even hear the argument for 2.5.
Yeah, it's certainly... of average. Um, and we haven't even touched on what a massive mistake the stunt casting of Glenn Powell as the Ricky Rocket Raccoon, whatever the hell his name is, rip-off character is in this one. Was he in the game?
So he's a different.
Was he in the game?
He's a different Nintendo character. He's Star Fox. So
okay.
Star Fox.
So not in the game.
No, Star
okay.
Fox.
So just a Nintendo suck.
Well, yeah, but that was the case with the first film as well. There was a whole bunch of characters in that were just kind of like brought in Nintendo characters that were brought in.
Right. And used with inventiveness and used with some kind of comedic approach, not like this character.
I wouldn't say necessarily the case. I will say, I think that the Star Fox character, I don't really understand why that character was included in it. What I was actually pretty happy with is that he's actually given really limited screen time.
He's included in it for exactly the same reason that the movie was made. It was rushed out less than 3 years after the first one came out to capitalize on the popularity that is still there for it and make a whole lot of money.
I mean, isn't that really the case with most animated sequels? Like, the majority?
Not when they're as bad as this. I don't think... It undermines what they did with the first film by taking the bucks to rip this out very quickly.
Look, I don't really care for just the I feel that you're immovable on this one, and I find that a little frustrating.
Yeah, I can tell. I am immovable on this one, yeah. You're right. I've got a very set opinion on why I think this is one of the worst movies of the year. And arguably the worst animated film in 5 years.
I mean, as someone who saw Goat about a month and a half ago, I mean, I struggle to call this one of the worst animated films because, boy, that was a struggle.
I haven't seen Goat. Can't comment.
All right. Folks, we're going to move on to a film which I think both Simon and I think is quite a bit more substantial. It's a little feature film called The Drama. Let's watch the clip.
So I want to say this thing about her laugh. You know how it's very cute, but it's also kind of like
repulsive even.
All right, so before we got married, we did this thing where we said the worst thing we've ever done.
Okay. I'll tell mine if we all do it. Promise?
What did you do?
This dog.
Beer bottles and porn.
You left him there overnight.
Yeah.
What's the worst thing I've ever done?
Okay,
Are you serious?
I'm sorry.
I'm gonna order an Uber.
Emma, what?
We're led into The Drama by a marketing campaign that wants to position the film as kind of a War of the Roses type of clash between two young people played by Robert Pattinson and Zendaya who are about to get married, and when the revelation comes of a certain moment, a secret in her past, things start to derail. Now, we haven't discussed this prior to the podcast. How spoilery are we going to get, Dan? Because there's spoilers, and then there's pivots that this movie offers that come with real impact. What do you want to do?
So look, here's the challenge with this movie. So I saw the movie yesterday. I had seen the trailer for it a few weeks back, and the trailer for it just presents this idea that you've got this young couple, they're quite in love, they're about to get married, and then a couple of nights before, I don't know if they talked about this in the trailer, but certainly this is the case in the movie.
They do not.
A couple of nights before they're set to get married.
Yep.
Yeah, a couple of nights before they set to get married, they have this conversation, just, the sort of drunk conversation people have while they're sitting around a table with a couple of friends. And one of them says, "What's the worst thing you've ever done?" And so there's four of them at the table, and one by one, they all go around the table talking about the worst thing they've ever had. And it's fairly jovial, and it's like, "Oh my God, you did that," and sort of getting to it. And then they finally get to the Zendaya character, who seems like a very friendly, amiable, lovely person. And then they ask her the question.
Now, if we're going to give this away, we have to warn people.
Yep.
We have to say, turn off your podcast now.
And she gives an answer, and the trailer doesn't tell you what that answer is. The trailer instead is built very much around the idea of you will not believe what the answer to this question is, and it's going to change everything for them. And with that as a sales pitch, I got into the cinema thinking, whatever it is, they're going to do one of two things. Either one, she will reveal what it is, and it's actually nowhere near up to the incredible standard set by this trailer. Like, you could not possibly live up to the way that it's built up in this trailer. It just can't happen. or they're going to keep the revelation for the end, and it's going to be they loop back and you find out what it is that she told the people. And then she just tells them, and I was actually floored. I think it absolutely lives up to the question on the table. And so as you ask the question, how much do we reveal? I don't think I want to reveal more than that. Because I think anyone who finds out what it is doing themselves a massive disservice should they ever stumble across this movie 5 years from now.
Yes, Dan, you're right. We are confronted by a moment that spins this movie off into a direction that isn't about how two young people deal with a secret being revealed that may derail their forthcoming nuptials. What we are faced with is a film about metaphors and symbolism that speaks very much to American society and the troubles that exist within it. Now, as the character started to discuss Zendaya's revelation, I began to think their reaction was over the top or unnecessary or not particularly believable. But then when I started to latch onto the film as sort of a broader satire, or not broad as in comical, but like broad as in more vast satire about America as a whole, I began to see what an utterly brilliant film I think this is. It is a film that reminded me very much of the work of Ruben Östlund, who has made films like The Square and Triangle of Sadness. He starts with a very sort of specific type of contented, happy, ambitious cast of characters, and then puts a microscope on them as to how awful and resentful and outwardly antagonistic they can become in the face of their lives being torn asunder. And without getting too far into the revelation, the Zendaya's revelation in this, I can say that it's, like I said at the start of the podcast, one of the most thoughtful, interesting, challenging works that American cinema has put out in quite a few months. Christopher Bogley, who directed this, he's done some good work. I haven't seen his first film, Sick to Myself, which all of my friends at the Underground Film Festival said was brilliant, and everyone who saw it on the festival.
Technically, his first film apparently is a thing called Drib, which I've not heard of before.
I've heard of that one before, no. And I did love Dream Scenario, but it doesn't go to the really dark places that the drama goes to. He's not American, he's Norwegian, and that, I guess, has that outsider perspective. And I can see, which I didn't know until like just prior to this podcast, so I can see sort of the European slant like Östlund does with his films and like Bogley has done with this one. It's a very sort of outsider look at the foibles of American culture as a whole and American individuals and ambitious young people as a microcosm. So, I think we did the right thing not to talk about the revelation, but just bear in mind, everyone, that when you see it and the scenes that come after it and scenes that happen in memory and scenes that happen in sort of forethought and characters' imaginations make this one of the most challenging movies you'll see this year.
Yeah, look, I don't know that I necessarily felt like entirely challenged by the movie. But certainly I thought that it was a really interesting question at the core of it, which is, can you, forgive's probably not quite the right word, but maybe get past a revelation from a friend like this, something of which will completely upend the way that you view this person. And I thought they were fairly successful in that. But I guess maybe a question that I want to throw at you is, we are obviously not answering what the question that the trailer poses, which is, what is this question? Okay, but if the trailer didn't frame it that way, and it didn't frame it as though you're going into this movie with this big revelation, kind of like if you'd seen a trailer for The Sixth Sense back in the day, and the entire sort of advertising pitch was, you will not believe the twist ending, and then like everything's kind of built around that. But if you kind of come to the twist ending, like it's kind of just like an interesting part of the text. In this, it's not really a surprise what the revelation, it's not, there's no big question over what the revelation will be beyond the fact that, you're just kind of curious what the terrible thing is that your friend did. Okay, but when it's actually revealed, like, it really just sort of shakes everyone to their core. But had it not been built as a question in the trailer, would we be afraid to talk about that? Or would we discuss this on its own terms as this interesting film that explores blank?
I'll respond to that by saying,
Because I don't think we'd hold it back.
praise be to... I don't think we'd hold it back as Australian critics. I think there's a very delicate razor's edge that American discussion on this topic would engender, would happen.
Okay, right. It's about Israel, Palestine. Okay, let's just put it out on the table.
That's about the one thing that isn't mentioned in this film, thank goodness. When I came out of it, and I texted my good wife, I said, praise be A24.
Did you also text your bad wife?
No, I'm not allowed to text them. Praise be to A24 for making a film like this, and fuck A24 for hiding it in and not having the balls to market it in the trailer. Because I had a half full cinema yesterday. The 10:30, the 11 o'clock session at Chatswood. What was, half full, and there were some giggly girls in there who love Zendaya, and there was probably some Twilight fans who love Robert Pattinson, and there were some cool people like me who wanted to see the new A24 movie. And there was chitter-chatter, and there was, oh my goodness, and oh gosh, sort of chat for about half of it, and then the cinema was silent for about the second half of the film. This thing just flowed over people, and they got how serious this situation had become. I don't believe some of the characters acted exactly as real human beings would act, and that's where I come across, and that's when I sort of argue that it's far more a metaphorical film. It's full of symbolism, and the characters all represent certain parts of American culture.
Sorry, just to interrupt, I feel that when you talk about movies saying that that's metaphorical and symbolism, well, you're talking about the sort of movie where suddenly a character will be talking about something and there'll be like a wolf on screen to depict it. Someone's not talking about it that way at all. Instead, he's really talking about the idea that this is a parable, is maybe one way to sort of talk about it rather than analogies.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I wish I could talk about the revelation and what it means to both the couple on screen and to the viewer it's very hard to talk about the reaction to the film that's already happening online in America, and how this pivot has really rocked some segments of the community. But just know that it's in there.
Yeah, I think I really liked a lot of the things that this movie's doing. I think that the film struggles with two aspects. One, you've got this character that's played by Alana Haim, who we know from the Paul Thomas Anderson film Licorice Pizza, and also from the very good band Haim. She, I think when she is presented with what the revelation is, she acts in a way which I get, but also in a way that a normal conversation happens between human beings at a table, unless you've got someone who is just hyper reactionary, and she's kind of paints a little bit like one of those sorts of people. But I do think that the conversation that follows, if it's a reasonable sort of fair and measured conversation, which we do see elements of this sort of within the next like 5 or 10 minutes of the movie, I kind of feel like it sort of opens it up to more questions, and Zendaya's got some pretty good answers as to where she's coming from, as difficult as hopping error as it is for her to discuss. I just felt like the human reactions to that just didn't really quite ring true for someone who was a reasonably good friend in that kind of a situation. Like it just didn't quite sort of nail it entirely. And I think that at the end, as things start going off the rails a little bit, and when I say go off the rails, it's not like a big sort of broad 1980s comedy. You mentioned War of the Roses, which is like pitched right up here, whereas the pitch of this is just this very sort of if people saw Dream Scenario, the last film that the director of this made, it's got a very similar tone running through it. Like it's very sort of down to earth and just very human, and just sort of, it feels real, man, sort of running through it. As you start getting towards the end and mistakes are made by some characters, and so it builds into like a denouement, to a point where, there's a big activity that takes place. I never quite bought like some of that. and some of the reactions and some of the way that was framed, it felt like that was a lesser movie than what I'd really seen up until then, which just seems so much sort of smarter. It just kind of, maybe just a bit of the steam of the film just gets lost a little bit by the end. So I don't know, maybe it's just the thing with like the editing, there's something in the structure which kind of just lost it slightly for me. So I don't think it's like a 5-star picture by any means, because like that sort of final act just doesn't quite deliver the goods, but certainly, it almost gets there. Like it is a very cool, interesting indie film.
Yeah, all of that I agree with. Yeah, for sure. I think together, after the revelation, she's not given a lot to do character-wise in Day. She has some very tense moments with Robert Pattinson, and certainly with her work colleagues, and as the nuptials near that and things start to unravel, she is a bride or a bride to be that's seeing her special day just start to wither away and disappear.
She sort of vanishes being a propulsive character, and it really becomes Robert Pattinson's film from that point in.
True, but I'm always conscious of the impact. Okay. I'm about to go down a path that speaks to the flashbacks, and I found those scenes just heartbreaking and at times deeply, deeply challenging. And I think Zendaya captures those as a mature woman in this. So, look, we probably shouldn't say too much. Go and see it. It is a film you'll be talking about afterwards. Like I said, I haven't stopped thinking about scenes from it and what it was trying to do since I saw it now, 36 hours ago. So, yeah, it's a really interesting movie.
3 very quick thoughts. One, I think that it is fantastic that we're seeing actors like Zendaya constantly. She's someone who easily, off the back of being a famous young actress, could be going off making sort of Hollywood fluff. But really, she does seem to be throwing herself into this sort of more challenging or sort of 90s era indie sort of spirit coming through, which I think is very cool. And she's by far probably the most interesting, consistent actress, I think, currently sort of in American cinema. She's fantastic, and this is another notch in her belt. I think good on her. Number 2, you were talking about the teenagers in the audience. I also had that same group of teenagers in my audience as well. In fact, I think that the way that you framed the sort of makeup of that crowd was very similar to what I experienced, although there was only maybe 7 or 8 people. Maybe getting close to 10, 12 people in the cinema. It wasn't a heavily attended 1:30 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon session by any means. But there was this group of maybe 4 teenage girls behind, and I don't really know how they were sort of vibing once you get to the more substantial part of the movie. But suddenly there's a scene right towards the end where the Zendaya and Robert Pattinson characters, they meet up. Okay, and it's a thing that kind of speaks to, it's maybe one of the hackier elements, because they introduce this like a Chekhov's gun at the beginning of the film, and so you know how it's going to end with the characters winding up in this place. And so they turn up in the place, but I heard the girls whispering to each other going, "Oh my God, she's going to turn up." And I'm like, well, yeah, have you not seen movies before? But then I realized, wait, no, they're teenage girls. And so I don't think they really had seen this.
I'm just glad they're at the cinema at all. That's amazing that they even go to the cinema anymore. That's great.
Especially to see a film like this. And then the third film that kind of touches upon this is watching this movie reminded me entirely of the experience I had as a teenager, which was going maybe not to an events mega place, although back in the day they didn't have events. It was Birch Cow and Coil in Brisbane, I wasn't going to a Hoyts. You wouldn't see this sort of thing. Instead, this is the kind of film I would have seen at the Dendy. Okay, and it really felt like a Dendy movie in terms of vibe all the way through. And it might have been just the fact I wasn't watching this on a VMAX screen. I was down in the dingy sort of dirty cinema where the screen's tiny as, and
That's
just,
where they
you're looking
sent
too
you.
far up at the screen. But certainly it just had the sort of old school Dendy vibe to it, and I really just enjoyed that about this. It's substantial, meaty, and is a throwback to the sort of cinema that I grew up watching. And
all right, Mr.
missed
90s.
terribly.
Mr. 90s, who would have been the stars of this in 1996, 97? This would have been Eric Stoltz and Patricia Arquette?
No. That'd be a little bit too old for this.
At that point? No, they would. Maybe. Or maybe they're just skewing younger now. Might have been, I don't know, Ryan Philippe and
no, that's
Marissa
too much in terms of
the
the ingenue. I think at this point you're talking about maybe a Julie. Oh gosh, what's her name?
Delpy.
No, not Julie Delpy. Oh gosh, why can't I think of her name at all?
Because you're getting old.
From she's like from Dusk Till Dawn.
Juliette Lewis.
Juliette Lewis. I think Juliette
Okay.
Lewis is maybe in this, and then also, oh gosh, who else can we throw in here?
See, now that's challenging. That brings to mind how important the casting of Zendaya is. Because if this was Juliette Lewis, I absolutely believe. I absolutely believe that she would still be capable. Yeah, exactly right. But Zendaya, not so much.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think that's probably fair. I mean, you could also maybe sort of get away with like, she's maybe too old for this at this point, but like a Winona Ryder, maybe. Sort of, we're talking about that sort of mid to late 90s. Like, maybe get away with that.
The drama.
Certainly a young Angelina Jolie.
Sure. Yeah, I could see that. It'd be very young, mid-90s though, wouldn't she? Wasn't?
Yeah, but she's sort of coming off the back of like around then. It's like Foxfire, just like Girl Interrupted. Like it kind of fits.
Yeah, I could see that. The drama is an A24 release, which means it's released out here by the good people at, I want to say Universal, I'm not entirely sure, and is in selected cinemas as we speak. Dan Barrett, what else is there to talk about?
Look, we should probably talk about TV at some point here.
At some point, I guess.
I very quickly just wanted to talk about Paradise Season 2. So I don't know if you watched any of... Well, did you watch any of Paradise Season 1? Okay, so Paradise Season 1, I feel we could be spoilerish at this point because, people have had a year or so to, catch up with this. The premise of this one is that a American president, as played by James Masters, has been killed. There's something just a bit weird about where he's living. Like, is he
James Marsden? Isn't James Masters Buffy?
Isn't Marsden?
Yeah, you said James Masters.
I knew I was going to get these mixed up. The guy what was in 30 Rock and X-Men and presumably other things.
Sure. Jury Duty. I've watched the new Jury Duty this week. Sorry, do go on.
Not on the run sheet, Simon. Can't talk about it.
Exactly.
So, he's the president. He's being shot and killed. And, there's just something a bit weird about it. And, like, I kind of cottoned onto it pretty quickly as to what the twist was. But within about 2 or 3 episodes' time, they kind of give it away, which is that we are watching a bunch of characters who are living in a bunker because there's been an apocalyptic event that's taken place. And so for much of that first season, it's really just working out the scale that everything's operating at as it's kind of the onion that's sort of had layers being peeled off it. And so you're kind of getting a feel as to exactly what's happened, how these people very specifically ended up in the bunker with this murder mystery that's kind of propelling the story. Episode 7 of 8 in the first season is the episode where they show you everything going down. And it is absolutely just a terror of an hour of television. You will be gripped to your seat. It is one of the best hours of TV I've seen in quite some time. It is a fantastic episode. And so when you reach the end of season 1, you're reflecting back and you're thinking, well, had like an interesting sort of twisty mystery at the beginning that sort of compelled you to want to keep on watching. It was kind of fun, a little bit dumb, but you're happy to go along with it. They've got this stonking great episode 7. And then you've got episode 8, which kind of just doesn't live up to episode 7, but you're like, what could? And so you're happy to go out on the thing. And it's like, I want to see next season. Then season 2 comes through and all the things that really felt sort of mysterious and interesting and substantial about that first season with the limited amount of substance that really exists in it, it's just not there at all for anything that happens in the second season. They take the characters largely out of the bunker, and with the main character being taken out, the guy that's played by... The character's name is Xavier. The actor's the gentleman that was in This Is Us. I can't think of his name right now. He's quite good. But as soon as he leaves, it's kind of like, in The Simpsons with the Itchy and Scratchy and Poochie show, and one of the executives like, anytime that Poochie's not in the scene, they should be asking, where's Poochie?
Where's Poochie?
As a character... As a viewer, anytime that you're watching the scenes that are still in the bunker and the Xavier character's not there, you're just sitting around going, where's Xavier? Because he's the only thing that's compelling really about this program. You've got the first episode, which is set at Graceland, of all places. And so you're seeing this woman who's played by Shailene Woodley in a much shorter than you'd expect. Yep, I was told that she was going to be a major character in the second season, and she's a character that has importance in the second season, but spoiler alert, doesn't make it past the third episode.
Ew.
But anyway, she's a tour guide at Graceland when the apocalyptic event takes place. And so she's hiding out at Graceland. And so a good portion of the first 2 episodes, I think it is her at Graceland. But the thing is, the show commits the cardinal sin that this show keeps on committing, but it's even worse with this Graceland storyline, which is that it's feels like it's a throwback for about 10 or 15 years, well, maybe 10 years ago, when it seemed like every single expensive prestige TV show kept on doing sort of cover versions of like well-known songs. And you'd have sort of like a fairly sort of soft female voice singing through sort of whatever. Radiohead, like you'd regularly find Radiohead being sort of reinterpreted as like background music in other scenes, whatever. It seems like this TV show Paradise wants to do this in every episode with a different song, and then they do it in the Graceland episode, and Can't Help Falling in Love is performed after you've been watching an hour in Graceland, not by Elvis, but by some terrible female cover artist. Like, come on, just give us an Elvis song if you're going to be celebrating Elvis for the hour. But the man's not to be
They
heard.
don't have that sort of money.
Mate,
They
I've got the money.
wouldn't have known. They wouldn't have known this was going to be a hit show when they did that. They'll get Elvis.
Mate, this is
music
second
now.
season. This second season, they could have done this. They
And it's
knew
what
what they
channel
were
is it?
doing. This is a
What
choice.
streamer it's on?
It's Disney Plus or Hulu.
Well, they've
Disney
got
Plus.
Elvis money. Oh,
Yeah, they've got Elvis money. They can afford to license the song. I mean, they licensed the song. They just didn't license the recording, which is just offensive. But anyway, if you can't get the Elvis song, you set the entire episode somewhere else.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
No,
But anyway,
point made.
big sin made. The entire season, it's just stupid. It gets to the final episode and they start introducing a very extreme sci-fi conceit to do with AI and time travel, and it is nonsense at this point. I'm out, Simon. I've never been angrier at a season of TV.
Let me just quickly jump in. Oh, are you going to do?
Sorry, very quick segue. I very purposely wanted to talk about these two shows together.
All right.
The aforementioned James Masterson.
Jesus Christ.
Masters to the Power of 4.
Do you cut out all your mistakes in the edit? Because I never listen to the show, and I'm sure that's what you do.
Podcast runs for about 7 minutes each week.
All right, yes, tell us about the next one.
Your Friends and Neighbors. This is the John Hamm show where he's a wealthy guy that loses his job and so decides to start robbing his friends. Didn't realize there was a need for a second season onwards. The end of the first season has this thing where they're like, hey, we're just going to give you a job back. And instead of taking his wealthy job back, he's like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to keep on robbing my friends. And it's like, there's been nothing this character's done this entire season that suggests that this is a lifestyle that he wants to maintain and that he wouldn't give everything to have like his previous job back.
How many friends
but
has he
whatever.
got? Aren't people starting to get sus? Is he robbing the same people 2 or 3 times?
He lives in like this wealthy community, and the entire sort of premise of this is it's very much about like an idea of wealth and a wealthy guy who suddenly have everything stripped away, and he suddenly realizes the opulent lifestyle of all of his friends to the point where they will have parties and friends over or whatever, and they don't really care about sort of locking away their jewels or their desks that have all sorts of, wealthy things in it. And so in the second episode, he's got a friend he's a wealthy guy that every time he signs a new contract does it with another like very expensive pen that's been provided to him. So he's got like just this drawer of $150,000 pens that he doesn't care about. He just throws them into a drawer. So he's just sort of stealing stuff like that. So just all these things that people have as trinkets in their studies or whatever. Okay. And so no one notices that these things are missing because it's just kind of like, it's just stuff that's around the house. Like, it's fine. Like, would you notice pens disappearing from your pen, like, caddy?
My wife's an avid pen collector, so I'd be happy for people to just turn up and take dozens of pens at a time. I've got pens all over this house.
I'll be there in the cover of night.
Ultimately,
his friends don't notice because of that. But you've got the aforementioned James M., who is now a regular character in the second season of this. And it's quite the departure from, even though he was killed off in the first season, he's still in Paradise a lot. But it was very nice seeing him leave Paradise, which is just a turkey of a TV program by the end of season 2, into Your Friends and Neighbors, which I'm putting it out there. Season 2 is a dramatic step up from season 1 in so many ways.
That was the segue to go from a bad season 2 to a good season 2.
Gotcha.
I weigh in with another bad season 2 with the new Monarch series on Apple TV. Season 2 has been quite the dud with some of the worst writing I've seen in
I think that was true from midway through season 1 onwards.
I know
I
you've
just
said
had
that.
out of
I
that
like
show.
season 1, but the season 2 sort of stumbled badly. I'm going to have a quick rave about one of the big shows on Netflix at the moment. It's called Something Very Bad Is Going to Happen. It is Netflix's new sort of big throw of the dice in terms of the horror genre. It is the story of a young woman who is being whisked away to a cabin in the woods where her fiance's family are putting on a very upmarket wedding for them. But when she gets there, this cabin is not some sort of Evil Dead style cabin, but it's this big sort of mansion cabin in the woods. And it's full of these wooden sort of corridors that lead nowhere and down vast hallways, so you can see your bedroom is a tiny little door down the end of this hallway, and there's all this creepy lighting, and there's taxidermied wolfhounds, Irish wolfhounds in the front entrance foyer, and there's an indoor sort of atrium where you can see the snow from the outside, but it's really the freakiest thing in the world. And the whole place lives under the shadow of this creature called the Sorry Man, which may or may not be real. By the end of episode 3, I'm starting to lean towards the latter. Maybe it is real. This is the best thing. This is the best Stephen King story that Stephen King didn't write. The second episode stumbles a bit, and I'm kind of getting back into it in the third episode. But the first episode of this, where the young couple are driving along this snowbound road and they find a baby abandoned in a car at a rest stop, which sets in motion a whole lot of panicky things, and she has to go off by herself, not the baby, the woman, to find help. It's just one of the best first hours of television I've seen in a long time, and it looks great.
Babies so rarely go off to get help for themselves.
No, well, yeah, very few babies can drive, and, you know, they don't like the snow. So, I don't know who Haley Z. Boston is. Best name ever, but he's the creator of the show.
Well, I think it's a she, Simon.
Oh, it's a she? Well, she's terrific. As is the lead actress here, Camilla Morone, who does some amazing work. Jennifer Jason Leigh and Buffalo Bill himself, Ted Levine, turn up as the father of the grooms. This is one of the creepiest shows I've seen in a long time. I watched this well into the night the other night and got a good scare out of it. So do give it a look. Something very bad is going to happen. I fear there's a lot of truth in that title.
Yeah, I was maybe a bit surprised by this one. I wrote about this in my newsletter like last week or the week before, whenever this came out. I was surprised at sort of how little pre-attention that this received, only because the two executive producers on this show, well, two of the executive producers on the show, are the Duffer Brothers of Stranger Things.
Yep.
And I would have thought that is such a saleable concept.
Sure. I didn't know that. I didn't know
what
that
the Duffer Brothers what the Duffer Brothers mean to Netflix. It's weird that they didn't go further into really sort of pushing their name as part of it. But I think audiences have still found this program, even though I don't think most of them know that Duffer Brothers connection.
Good. They should. It's quality television. Quality scary television. Television doesn't always scare as effectively as the big screen experience, but with this one, they create a sense of dread, which is, what's the word? Palpable? Tangible? Something like that. One of the bulls.
Yeah, I feel TV's done a much better job at horror in the last sort of 5 to 10 years, and certainly that was true of the genre. Well, it's true of the medium pre that.
Against past television or against film?
I'm television. I'm just saying, like, TV, I don't think was ever really particularly that great at horror. There was certainly, hours of TV, which I think may have sort of creeped people out a little bit. But, like people talk about like an X-Files episode, like, Home or something like that. And people go, oh my God, it was so scary. But broadly, I think it was just a lot harder to sort of generate the tension needed, particularly when most shows are. Well, most shows are like ad driven, so like you're in these sort of breaks where every 8 minutes the tension gets interrupted, and just there was a lot of things working against TV as a medium. But like certainly in a sort of age of streaming,
that's my point. Yeah, exactly. There's a lot more leeway to get that done. And I mean, you go back to I remember the impact that Salem's Lot had, the miniseries with David Soul back in 1980. It was like the first big broadcast TV show which was legitimately full on horror, and it was a sensation. So. But yeah, they're few and far between. You're absolutely right.
Did we have anything else we needed to have a bit of a chat about?
You were going to crap on about The Practice for a while.
Just really briefly, I found myself just rewatching The Practice. It just came up in my Disney Plus recommends the other day. I was just really surprised at how tight that program is. So I remember this as being just one of these shows where I remember being really into it at the beginning, and then my interest just faded after a couple of years. And I think that was true of a lot of people. But I went back and I was taking a look at the ratings of it. Like, this is a show that was a top 20 program for
Yeah,
much
it
of
was a
its
big deal in
run.
the day for sure. Yeah.
But like, even when people had stopped talking about the show, people are still watching this. In
It was
terms
the
of,
Grey's Anatomy of its day.
uh, yeah, sure. I think this has maybe a bit more substance going on than Grey's Anatomy. There's, it's suddenly a lot more happening within the program. But I guess maybe what I found to sort of, sorry, two things. One, just talking about like the, quality of it. I found a stat the other day which says that even to this day, there are more people that have been nominated for the like guest actors in a TV program category in the Emmys that were nominated for The Practice than in any other TV show in TV history. And it
Props
still
to you,
holds.
The Practice.
It was just like this.
Are we around the same time? This was like the counter show to LA Law. Didn't it sort of come out of that suited up like?
So LA Law, okay, we're getting a bit deep in than I planned here, but David E. Kelly, TV, extraordinaire.
Dude.
He starts out as a lawyer, gets hired by Stephen Bochco just before he launched LA Law,
Marries
and he
Michelle
needed some
Pfeiffer.
lawyers to. Yeah, not yet, but he needed some lawyers to like provide some, background material for LA Law. Anyway, David E. Kelly kind of got caught up with the idea of, yeah, maybe I could write some TV. And so he joins like the writing team of LA Law and very quickly becomes like the guy on the show. He becomes a showrunner after a couple of years. Not bad for a guy that's got no other TV experience than LA Law.
Anyone can
And
write
so
TV.
creates that. LA Law, like, we don't really think about it being a groundbreaking TV show now, but it kind of was, because what it was doing back at that time was it started depicting the court system as a place where actual humans interact. So you'd be watching that and it'll be overt in the front, but also in the backgrounds of scenes. You see people that are just kind of bored by the trial that's going on. You see people cracking jokes, like people actually acting like human beings kind of do within like a TV 80s context within like a courtroom. And so like it's kind of revolutionary in regards to that. But the practice is David E. Kelly coming back years later to do another legal court procedural. So LA Law finished in like, 92 or 93, and David E. Kelly had left the show by that point, and by like 92, 93, he's doing picket fences, which leads us ways to Chicago Hope and sort of around the place. Comes back to a law show, and instead of doing another LA Law type of show, he's like, well, what if we actually start exploring some of the moral complexity of serving as a lawyer? So each episode is very much posing some sort of moral question as to how you're supposed to behave, what's the requirement of you to be able to engage in someone who's done something horrible. And there's like a real interesting moral question just at the core of every episode. And that's certainly true for the first 2 seasons. But my overall takeaway just from this conversation was, if you haven't ever watched The Practice, or you kind of remember it, or you just, whatever, most people put it out of their mind. It's not a show that anyone talks about anymore. Go and just watch the first 7 episodes or 6 episodes, whatever that first season is. It's a complete story. So there's a narrative arc that runs you through most of that season. So you'll get a satisfactory conclusion of it. You don't need to finish it. Like, you don't need to go on season 2 or 3 and sort of go on, but just watch those first 6 episodes. The first episode is a little bit too TV formulaic. Like, it's a courtroom thing, so like every episode leads up to that thing of, is the person guilty or not guilty? And because it's a pilot episode and the person that's up on charges, like, it's a teenage girl who's like has like a strong moral center, like, she's gonna be innocent by the end. So it's just kind of, it goes through some beats. But once you get past that first episode, the rest is just really substantial in a way that I was very surprised by. It's really good TV.
Has this just started on the Disney Plus, or has it been in the back catalogue for a while now?
No idea. I just noticed it on there the other day, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to take a look back at The Practice.
Oh, very quickly, while we are talking about things we've just noticed on streaming and had a look at, I watched a film starring the guy from Veep. Oh, what's his name? The Offsider. Tony Hale. It's a movie called Sketch. He plays a widower who's got 2 young kids. The little girl, can bring to life the creepy sketch monsters on her in her drawing pad. I got to tell you, this was one of the most exciting, scary. It kind of wants to be a Goosebumps, Jumanji sort of mashup, and it absolutely achieves that. But it also has some great special effects. I was thinking of your little one when I was watching this, and there's a couple of moments and a couple of monsters which are just too scary for a 4-year-old at this stage. But when she gets sort of around the 8 or 9 mark, make sure you watch Sketch. And the families out there who are looking for something to do over the Easter weekend as we record this, Sketch is a terrific sort of family adventure for the older kids and the grown-ups as well. So there you go. That's my blink. I missed it on its brief cinema run, and I've heard good things about it, so I caught up with it, and I'm glad I did.
Yeah, that one's streaming on Prime Video.
It
so
is.
this is just like a 2024 film, just so that people have that context.
Seth
Speaking of Tony Hale and horror, my wife has fallen into a Dawson's Creek rewatch.
Yes.
And she was watching it the other day and she's like, hey, take a look at this. And she shows me on her iPhone Tony Hale with a full head of hair.
It's scary, isn't it, when you see bald people with a full head of hair? I know.
Yeah.
It is weird. I can't wait to see my old photos when I finally go fully bald.
I don't know why, Simon.
So.
I don't know why, but somewhere I came across an old picture of you.
Me?
Yeah, during the week.
Why? How? Where from?
No, I know, because I was looking for a picture of you for... We'll talk about this later on.
Yeah.
Just for late at night.
I know why. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I did a search for you. I did, Simon Foster film critic, and there's a picture of a very young you sitting in a cinema as part of some sort of feature story for something.
Okay.
But anyway,
how
I
red
laughed
chairs?
and laughed. Yeah, red chairs.
Yeah, the sound of the national film. It's not that old, maybe 10 years old, but yeah, it's pretty old. I was thin and had hair then.
More than 10 years.
We had Screen Watching. I haven't aged well. Find us on Facebook at the Screen Watching Podcast, on YouTube, where you really should see the video of what we do here. It's a great bit of editing that he does. At Screen Watching, you can email us. I've watched it occasionally. Sometimes when I go to sleep and I wake up in the middle of the night, it's moved on to our next one, and there we are. Screenwatchingpodcast@gmail.com. And my stuff is Screenspace. The newsletter is on Substack. Please subscribe. Dan, self-promotion.
Oh, look, I love doing that. Folks can find my works at Always Be Watching. That's at alwaysbewatching.com. It's a newsletter that comes out Monday through Friday with interesting stories about the world of TV and mostly sort of streaming TV with a little bit of video game stuff in there, a little bit of movie things, depending on whatever's happening during the week. We've got that going on. And then on Fridays, I send out a bonus email, which is like a TV guide for your streaming needs over a weekend. So it's all the new and returning shows of that week.
I met Patrick Bramall this week, the star of Colin from Accounts. I don't think I'm allowed to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. I'm doing some extra work, and I was on set of Colin from Accounts for 3 days this week.
And when you say you met him, was that him turning to you say, stop looking at me in the eyes?
Yeah, don't come any closer. And the assistant director jumped in front of me and said, no, don't talk to Patrick. But it was quite sad because I was on there for 3 days, and on the Friday was when Harriet Dyer, the young actress from Colin from Accounts, when her American TV show was cancelled after one season. I assume she knew about it before Friday. That was when it broke in the news and I found out, but there was kind of a general sort of, just be gentle around Harriet today sort of feeling about being on set.
You know what my feelings are about that?
Harriet Dyer?
If you're going to appear in DMV, then you deserve it. Man, that show stank.
You've changed. You're mean. I didn't know. When did you get so mean?
Did not care for that program at all.
All right, I'm done with this. I'm sick of fighting with you. I want to go and fight with someone else now.
Okay, folks, this has been the Screen Watching Podcast. We'll be back next week. Folks, we'll see you then.